Great to have you here on this Monday. We've got a great lineup this time. Thanks for making us a part of your day. Exit poll after exit poll is finding a common theme. Voters in both parties angry at Washington. What's the source of the rage, and who benefits politically this November? Former Northern Virginia Congressman Tom Davis joins us now, a Republican. He represented Fairfax in the U.S. House. He also served as chairman of the Fairfax Board of Supervisors. Good to see you as always.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks for
Thanks very much for coming in. I've been struck by the early primary contests and the exit poll information that comes out after voters cast ballots each time, South Carolina, Nevada, whatever it is. Obviously, if we've got a socialist who's drawing big crowds and a billionaire, voters are all over the map. One thing, though, that seems to unite them is a sense of real anger. And I know we're always, as a country, we're always angry at Washington, but it seems pretty intense right now. And I'm curious, you travel a lot. Give us a sense from your perspective why that is.
Well, because government's producing very little. I mean, it hasn't done much for the average person over time, but more importantly, you look at Washington, it's complete gridlock, and nobody thinks the town is working very well, even though Congress just had a fairly productive session by congressional standards. But look, as the culture is changing around a lot of people, and they're left out of the economic equation because they don't have skills, we're seeing an anger toward Washington, and as a result, you get Sanders and you get Trump, and people like somebody who picks up the brick and throws it through the plate glass window. That's what Trump does.
We've had divided government a lot over the last, go back a few decades, and it's Democratic president, Republican Congress.
Right.
We've had every possible permutation. Right. Is it not so much that we have divided government, but the seeming unwillingness for people to work, once there's an election and we know, okay, this is how it's going to be for 24 months, is it the frustration that people once here aren't working together more?
Right. Look, under Bill Clinton in a Republican Congress, we did some remarkable things. We balanced the budget. We reformed welfare. We got through the Mexican peso crisis. We got through foreign affairs issues. There was always, you went up to the lines and then you knew the country came first. That hasn't happened now in the last 16 years. Both of these presidents have been pretty divisive figures in terms of their ability to work with Congress. And members go home and their base voters don't want them to work with the other party. So that helps drive it as well. A lot of this comes from the grassroots and the people who participate in primary elections, who tend to be a pretty thin ideological slice of the electorate. A lot of yours may be activists, but do they vote in primaries? Voting in November basically doesn't matter in most of these congressional districts around the country. The races are decided in primaries.
Does this benefit anyone in particular in November, once the nomination process dust has settled and each party has its standard bearer? With Democrats having controlled the White House for 8 years, is there some peril here for them?
I think controlling the White House is not necessarily an advantage in this case, but let me give you two statistics. Trump's unfavorable rating across the country, 70%. Hillary Clinton's unfavorable rating across the country, 67%. You can see a race to the bottom, I think, with these two.
We've seen in the past third-party candidates get in, they rarely threaten in the sense of their, I don't know if we've ever had a third-party candidate win. Right. Certainly haven't in the modern era. But as we saw with Ross Perot, they can impact the vote. If it was Trump-Sanders, which now seems unlikely, Mike Bloomberg was likely to get in. What if it's Clinton-Trump? Do you think someone with the ability to pull votes gets in and has an impact?
Well, I think there's room for a third party because I think a lot of people don't like the choices they're going to get, even if it's Hillary and Trump. But the question is are you in it to win it at that point? Because if you don't get 270 electoral votes, the vote goes to the House of Representatives, where you have to carry 26 states, and Republicans will control that action. Now, we know the Republicans don't agree on a lot within themselves. The one thing they agree on is they don't like Democrats. But other than that, they're basically an organized conspiracy to seize power. They don't really, there's a lot of disunity within that Republican coalition over what you need to do.
Tomorrow stands to be a very remarkable day with so many states voting all at once and so many delegates up for grabs. Donald Trump is doing well in many, not all, but many of the states where voters cast ballots tomorrow. Do we wake up Wednesday morning knowing with some certainty who the Republican standard bearer is?
Not certainty, and Trump's doing well in every state. He may not carry every state, but he's doing well in every state, and he'll run first or second in every state. But these are proportional states. So you can go out in Virginia and you can vote for Kasich, and you don't waste your vote, because those are votes away from Trump. And frankly, keeping Kasich alive would be Rubio's best challenge, because in Ohio you need to deny Trump the 66 electoral delegate votes that you get in a winner-take-all scenario, which is what happens there. So we'll have maybe a clear picture, maybe not, in terms of what goes on. I always like to see the votes cast before the pundits call the race. But Trump's in a pretty good position at this point with divided opposition, and that opposition, if somebody drops out, Trump picks up some of that vote. He doesn't just pick up what he's got.
He is an atypical candidate, to be sure, and there's so much commentary right now about the impact on the party if he's the nominee, the impact on down-ballot candidates. And you were head of the NRCC.
Yeah.
You traveled the country for years. You recruited candidates. You know what it is to help win, incumbents and challengers alike win elections in good environments and in tough ones. Talk about what it would mean for the party in terms of ideology, politics, and the other contests that will be decided in November if Donald Trump is the nominee.
He's clearly not the establishment candidate, so he rocks the Republican establishment. Then they have to make a decision. Do you go Hillary Clinton, and with that you lose the Supreme Court for the next generation, or do we put the best face on Trump? And, you know, 2 polls last week showed Trump leading Hillary Clinton in Ohio and in Florida. It was close. It was a margin of error, 2 points in each. But this race is far from over and will have to bear itself out. You have a very divided country. The president's favorable is around 47, his unfavorable around 48, 49. And it's just a very divided country. And these two really tear at it and have forced people to make a choice people would rather not make.
But when you think about the so-called autopsy, the report that was done after Mitt Romney's loss to Barack Obama in 2012, and the census, at least for some, that seemed to emerge about what the party needs to do in a rapidly changing country if it's to be viable and successful in future cycles, that you would end up potentially with someone like Donald Trump, who seems to offend some segment of the electorate every time he... I mean, as big as the crowds are, as enthusiastic as his supporters are, there's clearly the downside.
He's picked in that autopsy, which said the Republicans need to get a bigger share of the growing minority vote to win. And he's just ripped that up and thrown it in the trash can. But he's done something else, and that is he has brought out white voters who have never participated before. That's not a very good long-term strategy, but in the short term, whether it works or not, you got to remember on the Hillary Clinton side, too, she has high negatives, and she has her own set of issues over there. And so it's not like he's running against a dynamo there that's unbeatable. But it'll be a tough race for Republicans in urban areas. Trump does not run well in wealthy suburban areas and urban areas.
Speaking of white voters, I want to share with you and the folks at home and then get your reaction to the conversation that Donald Trump had yesterday, I believe, with Jake Tapper of CNN regarding the endorsement of white supremacist group leader David Duke.
Well, just so you understand, I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know, did he endorse me or what's going on? Because, you know, I know nothing about David Duke. I know nothing about white supremacists. And so you're asking me a question that I'm supposed to be talking about people that I know nothing about.
But I guess the question from the Anti-Defamation League is, even if you don't know about their endorsement, there are these groups and individuals endorsing you. Would you just say unequivocally you condemn them and you don't want their support?
Well, I have to look at the group. I mean, I don't know what group you're talking about. You wouldn't want me to condemn a group that I know nothing about. I'd have to look. If you would send me a list of the groups, I will do research on them, and certainly I would disavow if I thought there was something wrong. But you may have groups in there that are totally fine, and it would be very unfair. So give me a list of the groups, and I'll let you know.
Okay. I mean, I'm just talking about David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan here, but...
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know David Duke. I don't believe I've ever met him. I'm pretty sure I didn't meet him, and I just don't know anything about him.
Congressman Davis, your reaction?
I think you ought to get up to snuff on who David Duke is pretty quick. And I think initially, if you look at it, he disavowed it. And then he came back the other way. He's obviously unscripted at this point. But let's make it good.
Is he unhinged? I mean,
No,
if you offer me apple pie and I haven't seen the apple pie, I can surmise two things from the offer. It's pie and it's apple. Right? I mean, how much do you need to know about a white supremacist group to at least, I'm not saying he has to disavow them. Maybe that's not his thing. But to say, oh, gee, I haven't researched this white supremacy. I'm not sure what that is. The guy's 70 years old. He's a political animal. We all know he gets it, right?
He didn't endorse David Duke. Let's just make it clear. Duke endorsed him, and the question is, do you so let's put this into perspective. When I was chairman of the committee that we wrote did a lot of stuff for D.C., at one point one of the operatives in D.C. called me Ku Klux Klan. And so this rhetoric gets thrown around, and I think Trump is being careful, but he better get up to snuff, because I think most Americans know who David Duke is. And this is a guy who's radioactive. You don't want to be near him. You want to denounce where he stands. That's just where the mainstream of America is if you want to win elections.
It's a reminder that, as fun as it is to watch someone who is sort of rewriting the playbook as he goes, who has incredible skill in terms of dominating the media, generating attention. When he needs to change the narrative, he can do something or say something that changes the narrative on a dime. It's the sort of skill that most politicians, dream of having but have never had. When you're making it up as you go along, you can end up in a situation like this where you're debating what used to be politics 101, unless you're in some very specific place in America where the support of a David Duke might help you. For the most part, it is totally radioactive, right?
Well, I don't know if it helps you. I don't even think it helps you on the turnout issue. But one thing about Donald Trump is he's not in the politically correct category. And I think that's something some voters find attractive about him.
Virginia.
I think he needs to get up to snuff on this one pretty quick, though, and put some distance.
You know Virginia very, very well. Talk about what you expect to see tomorrow with Clinton Sanders, and that race could be nearing sort of the end game. Not that Sanders necessarily gets out, but the math is going to look awfully good potentially for Hillary Clinton quite soon. Virginia. What do you expect on the Democratic side? What do you expect on
the last time we really had contested races on both sides, Democrats outpolled Republicans by a significant margin. I think you're going to see a record Republican turnout this time. I don't think you'll see the same on the Democratic side. Trump has found a group of people that have traditionally not participated in the electoral process. He's going to bring them out, and that's what makes him so difficult to defeat. He's got new people coming in. The establishment doesn't know who these people are. He's upset the whole thing, but he has ignited voters who have not participated in the past and see some hope in him.
We're going to see a lot of the nominees, whoever they are, come the late summer and fall, because Virginia is one of a handful of battlegrounds. Are there things we can look for in the primary turnout and results that set us up for and offer any kind of prediction about who's going to generate traction in, as I say, what could be maybe one of 5 or 6 states that hold the key to the whole thing?
The Republicans' problem has been Northern Virginia, which votes more like New Jersey than the rest of Virginia. Trump will do well down the I-81 corridor in Southern Virginia. He'll do very well in these areas in the primary. He'll do very well in these areas in the general election. Question is, how bad does he get defeated up here? And so tomorrow night, I'm going to be watching to see how does he do in Northern Virginia? How does he do in Virginia Beach? How does he do in these areas where the incomes are a little bit higher, the population's a little more mixed? What does he bring? That's what I'm looking at, because I think the key for any Republican to carry Virginia is they've got to limit the damage in Northern Virginia. John Kasich would certainly do that. With Trump, I'd like to think he's probably more vulnerable up here than any other Republican they can nominate, but we'll see.
Do you think we'll see talk? Will we hear talk Wednesday morning that it's all over and that we kind of know who the nominees are?
We've heard that talk now. You've got the talking heads in the campaigns want to make it their own race. You still have a long way to go at this point, but we'll have a little clearer picture on Wednesday, clearly.
Former Northern Virginia Congressman Tom Davis, always great having you here. Thank you very much for your time. We'll be talking with you again. Keep it here on News Talk. When we return, Congressman Don Beyer. He's on deck. Keep it here.